Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Milsurp World podcast. I forgot what number episode this is. Today we are joined by a special guest, Mark.
Hello.
Say, Mark.
Hello, everybody.
So, of course, we have Aaron here with us as well, and we're going to start off the episode today like we traditionally do with a newcomer. We are going to ask you, Mark, how you got into Milsurps. What's your favorite Milsurp? And what's your favorite way to cook lobster?
Well, first off, they always say that Catholic school makes the best atheist. And I think Maine applies with seafood for me. I've never been a fan of seafood. So now that we've got that out of the way, how did I get into Milsurp? So I've always been a fan of more modern military history. And that kind of evolved into firearms when I was about 14 or 15 years old. I had a cousin who actually died last year. May he rest in peace. He fostered that interest and taught me the ropes. And as I got older, I'd read books. Later on, I worked at a major auction company for 3 years, cataloging guns. My big focus there was Milsurps. And I've always been interested in this stuff, and I just kind of enjoy it. It's always something new to learn. You know, there's Mausers, Mannlichers, Mosin-Nagants, Arasakas, Springfields, Grands, you name it. And it's just a wide field that's always interesting. You meet a lot of people, make a lot of connections. But as for my favorite Milsurp today, I've kind of been lately smitten with Imperial German Mausers. I like the 98A carbine and the Gewehr 98 rifle. I acquired an early 98A made by Danzig earlier in the year. And it's just a handy gun. I have a 1916 Obendorf Mauser Gewehr 98 coming also. The fit and finish of Imperial Mausers and their history is amazing.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of diversity in military surplus, and especially just in, Imperial German stuff. It's a pretty long and interesting point in firearms history. When Imperial Germany existed, from for 1871 to 1918 or 1919. So you have really interesting evolution from big bore black powder to the smaller bore smokeless, and a lot of the German guns really do show that sort of evolution of from single shot black powder all the way to the magazine fed Mauser, and it's a really neat firearms history that you can get just within German guns of that time period. So it's a very interesting one.
Well, that First World War is really a pivotal point in the development of firearms. You've got 71 Mausers being used by the Germans, or if you're a poor Russian soldier, you might have a Grau or a Vetterli. You might even have a Mosin-Nagant, but then you've got machine guns. You got the first submachine guns like the Villa Perosa, the MP-18. Just a wide variety of guns. I've even heard that some of the rear line Ottoman infantry would have percussion muskets, and the guys fighting. That's what Gage once told me, and then obviously the guys in the front line would have 7.65 Mausers and Maxim. So
I've seen a lot of studio photos, like German World War I postcards, and they're like in a studio, and they're holding like an old percussion cap muzzle loader, and it's always kind of interesting to see that like a World War I German soldier holding a percussion cap.
Well, what's interesting on that note is when a lot of the German snipers went to war early on, they brought their own personal hunting guns. There's a photo in Dieter Storr's book of a German hunter, and before he goes off, I believe it was Bavarian, and he's got a sporting Mauser, not something sporterized, but something that was built or made by a gunsmith into a high-end sporting rifle.
All right. Well.
Right. Well, you first. Do you want to do it?
I mean, we can get into our topic. I can lead the topic if you want, or do you want to, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, your voice will sound better, recorded on your audio, so.
That's true. Our topic today, and this is something that Danny has been working on for a while, and something we've had many discussions off the podcast about. It's features of Milsurp rifles, specifically bolt-action rifles, we should say, and items that people prefer or are deemed necessary by certain people. And basically we've got a list of items here that if you agree or disagree, it's going to narrow down your choice of what rifle you would want to go after. And there's some interesting stuff on here, isn't there, Danny?
Yeah. So it's pretty much, this is getting like stepping away from milsurps and instead of thinking of milsurps in terms of like their history and maybe which ones you prefer just based off of like what country they're from or their history, whatever, stepping outside of that and looking at it from like a practical standpoint of which as a modern day shooter, which military surplus bolt action rifle offers you just the overall better shooting experience, or maybe just which one has the sort of set of preferred features that are better for modern day shooters.
Now, this would be like range shooting, right? Not hunting? Or would you say that it could be applied to both?
All of the above. I would almost understate the range shooting because, a lot of people, they primarily just go to, a static range. They just pull their rifle out of their case, they slap it, they sit at a bench, they shoot it off a bench, and then they put it back in the case and bring it back home. That's all they do. And in terms of that, those people tend to prefer the guns that are going to be kind of outside of the focus for today. The guns that I'm referring to more are guns that would excel at that. You could take them to the bench and they would shoot, good groups. But you could also take them hunting. You could also take them, take it on a hike. If you're going to be, hiking or camping in a part of the United States or anywhere that maybe has, bears or some other, wild animal that might pose a danger to you, that this could be a rifle that would, could neutralize any threats, but is also, light and handy and comfortable enough that you would want to carry it around. And also an action that's, reliable and safe to shoot.
Okay.
So to sort of preface this, when sort of narrowing down this list, so when you go through these choices and sort of ask yourself, which features are important to you, what I think what a lot of people tend to do, and this is I run into this quite a bit, with everything. I think a lot of people have emotional attachments to certain guns or certain family of guns, or maybe guns that come from certain countries. People just have a very strong emotional attachment, and they'll tend to defend, very strongly features that are very inferior. So, it's sort of like people are painting the target, or they're painting a target around their arrow, instead of sort of seeing which one is truly the best. And one of the big defenses that I get out there whenever we talk about some of these features, a lot of people say, hey, that's good enough. It was, it's good enough for XYZ. It's good enough for me shooting at the range. Mine's, the ever ubiquitous, mine's just fine, or my gun's never jammed or whatever. So this is going to be pulling away from that. And instead we need to separate ourselves from our emotions and look at these with complete logic and no existing bias.
That being said, infields suck.
What about Mosin to Gantz?
I'll put a Mosin above an infield. I'll just get that hate right out of the way.
Ouch!
I don't care. They know I'm kidding. I don't have a stake. I don't have a stake in that fight because I don't give a crap.
Everybody across the Anglosphere is going to be angry at you now. Everybody in Australia, Canada, and England. So,
I honestly could not care less about the argument with the Lee Enfield, but I get what Danny's trying to say. Is we're trying to stay objective here. We're trying to focus on features alone, and yes, certain features are going to exclude certain kinds of rifles, and if you are okay with that, then so cool. That's good for you. But objectively, there are certain features that are not as good as others, but they existed on certain guns for whatever reason, be it money, be it technology. They're there for a reason, but that doesn't mean they're good.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of these features, they hang around and appear on milsurps at certain time periods, only because that was the cheaper option for the country to make, or because it's a holdover from the technology of a certain time period, and it just kind of kept getting passed on. But it was never like a choice. You know what I mean? Nobody would ever pick that purposely. which I guess just lead us into, we should just talk about the first 3 features here that I'm going to just say that these features are just indisputably inferior.
Hold on. We'll get into our first discussion, which are these 3 discussion points that Danny's trying to get into. So, we'll go into what I would consider an easy one that people are going to probably fight over still, but I think is still pretty hard to dispute, which is going to be double stack versus single stack magazines.
Yes. And, this is one of those things where people who happen to be fans of guns that have a single stack magazine,
like
they'll
myself,
defend a single stack magazine. Those they'll defend the magazine just because it's on the gun that they like.
Real quick, off the top of your head, so single stack would be almost anything with an M-block clip is going to be single stack. So that's going to be Carcanos, that's going to be M95s, that's going to be Berthier's.
And then outside of M blocks, then you go into like stuff like the Mosin,
the 1891 Mausers,
the 89 Belgian.
Yep. All the pre 93 Mausers.
The GW88. I know that has an end block clip, but
pretty much all the single stack guns are going to probably fall into this. And then probably just for good measure, we'll just go ahead and say it that tube fed rifles, of course, inferior.
I mean,
the Lebel.
The Carpatch.
No, I just feel like if I don't say that, somebody's going to argue.
In that category.
Lebel, I don't know, 7184. If somebody wants to argue that.
Whatever, the crop. I'm not pronouncing it right.
The Portuguese rifle that starts with a K.
Yes, that one.
Kropatschek 1886.
Which is essentially what they base the Lebel on.
I've handled maybe 10 Lebels, but they're certainly uncommon. I mean, every one of them I've handled has had something wrong with the magazine tube. The full length ones, the R35, they seem to work a little better. I don't know what it is, but
my Lebel had a pretty big mag issue when I got it. Just the spring was almost disintegrated.
I'm gonna give you guys some inside information that I've told very few people this, but for some reason, I don't know why, but the R35 I absolutely love, and I would love to have one. I don't really particularly care for French firearms. I don't have a particular love of the Lebel, but the R35 is probably one of the favorites that I do not have.
They are a fun shooter. They have a bit of recoil, but I enjoy shooting mine.
Anyway, that was just a side tangent, but I love the look of that gun. It's a 3-shot magazine, right?
Yep. But you can get 5 of them in there. You can get 1 on the loader, 1 in the mag. So you can get 5 of them in there. Kind of obsolete by the time World War II rolls around, but it is what it is.
I mean, so is the Berthier, but that was also their main firearm by that time, too.
Well, at least you got 5 shots. Well, I mean, 5 shots with an end block clip, but you're right.
In some of them, you get 5 shots.
Not all of them were switched.
That's true, but I was going to say it's better than probably going to war with a Krag if you're in Denmark or Norway.
Ooh, shots fired, guys.
Yeah,
shots fired across the board.
Now that is a really interesting, Krag versus Berthier.
We're gonna get a lot of people angry. It's not just gonna be the Enfield or Mosin guys. We're gonna get everybody angry, guys. So stick with us. Everybody's gonna get mad
pretty much anybody with an emotional attachment, and again. I'm not saying that you can't like these guns that have inferior features. There's plenty of guns that aren't going to make this list for me that I just really, really like for reasons that I can't quantify. Not saying they're not cool. Not saying don't collect them. Only if we're going to be just focusing on which bolt action features really are, superior and which ones you would want on this, mythical, maybe, best-ish, Milsurp rifle.
So, as Danny said, we talked about at the beginning, some of these are holdovers from older technology. So single-stack magazines are simpler. Therefore, most of the guns we mentioned are older. Or they use an M-block clip, which is easier to do a single-stack versus a double-stack. In fact, I think the only double-stack M-block I can think of is the M1.
I think you're right. That's the only one I can think of.
That's the only one I could think of, too.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not impossible for a double-stack M-block clip to be effective, but it's just not something that was ever really used except for the M1, which is outside of our realm of discussion. So
yeah, it is a bit outside. But the M1, there was a lot of a lot of money and R&D went into developing the M1 M block clip. So, that wasn't just, we take it for granted now because they're very common, and, they're very high quality and they last for a long time. But, it wasn't always so. It took a lot of investment to make that become a thing.
Well,
and to get into the next point.
Hold on. So we're saying, well, I'll let you talk, Mark, in a sec, but we're saying that double stack is the superior choice in this discussion.
Double stack magazine superior to single stack in every way. If it wasn't, they would have made the M1 single stack, right?
Ooh, we're going there, guys. Single stack, for the people that don't realize it, single stack creates a much bigger magazine, and typically it requires the gun to have an exposed magazine underneath the wood line, versus a double stack magazine, which allows you to have a more seamless gun profile. It also helps prevent the magazine from being damaged because it's not something that can be bashed into the side of something. Anyway, Mark, sorry, go on with your point.
Well, I was going to say, when John Grant, you look at John Grant's earliest designs, 1919, 1920, they had detachable magazines. I don't know if they were intended to be like spare magazines like we have today. I'd have to look back in Hatcher's book, but the Ordnance Department didn't like that idea, so they wanted him to go with an end block clip. You got the Pedersen 276 toggle lock rifle. That also had the same thing. But that was something from the Ordnance Department, which has been historically cheap and conservative, telling the designers to put some save money, basically, because that's what governments do.
Well, the discussion
which is really crazy.
The discussion we had with Althias when he was here, and it's something I've also discussed with him about before off the podcast, is essentially why countries were so resistant to detachable magazines is because of, for one, the added expense of the creation of a magazine that's detachable versus a stripper clip, and then two, they were worried that the troops would lose it. And it's like silly to think of nowadays, but also, like, say it costs 5 cents to make a stripper clip of ammo versus $10 to make a magazine. You're not going to make as many magazines, so you're not going to outfit your troops with as much ammunition, technically. And then also, if they lose it, you're screwed.
Well, I got an interesting side note, if you all don't mind. It's a little more modern on that subject. But
what's that?
You can buy, let's say, a PMag today, $10-15. Now adjusted for inflation back during the Vietnam War, when the M16 was first in service, 30-round mag, very equivalent to $50 today, give or take a bit. So I watched a documentary, I think it was an American Rifleman. They talked about how the guys in SOG would mail away to a distributor in Beverly Hills, and the magazine was like $8 at that time. It just shows how far we've come along with manufacturing, how cheap things are. Some things like that are cheap today. So I wonder if maybe with the manufacturing techniques we have now, if we had detachable magazines back then, they'd be cheaper.
I think that's the biggest issue, is the cheapness of it, and then the trust in the troops is different. You still had a lot of holdover of the upper class being in charge of the troops and looking down on the individual soldier, and I think that's part of it, as well as just straight up penny pinching. Because when you're talking about outfitting a military for an entire country, especially one as large as the United States, it's very expensive to make even small changes.
And I will say too, on the practical side, if you see my G41 video, I reload my G41 with 2 5-round stripper clips. Mm-hmm. And then I reload the G43 by removing the magazine, putting away that magazine into a magazine pouch, and then taking out a fresh magazine and loading it that way. And the reloading times are very, very close on both guns. So if you're having to retain that spare magazine, the time that it takes to put that back into your pouch is actually pretty substantial. And in the end, you end up with a reload speed that's like pretty comparable.
Anyway, we're getting off the subject.
Yes.
All right, so getting on to the next topic of comparison here, which is, as Danny called it, the indisputables.
Yeah, I'm going to call it the indisputables. And I know, nothing is truly indisputable or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that at least 90% of Milsurp people would agree that this is true. And if you asked anybody, like Deanne or Matthias or whatever, like their opinion on these. I'm pretty sure everybody would agree this. So that's kind of why I'm calling it the indisputables, because only people that would be are severely emotional detached will.
So we had double versus single stack, and we're going to say double. And that's just our opinion. I mean, I am a huge M95 fan, as people know, which is single stack. So, I mean, I can at least admit that that's not the perfect system. All right. And this is going to also hurt me as well. Rimmed ammunition versus not. Obviously, rimmed ammunition is around because it's easier to headspace off of. And so when you have technology that is hard to replicate efficiently, or to make, let's say, to make ammunition that's reliable in large quantities, it's easier to headspace off of a rim versus off of the shoulder.
Yeah, because rimless ammunition does require like near perfect, manufacturing of ammo. So the length of the case has to be, pretty much identical for a rimless one to headspace correctly. So yeah, so you do have this holdover of rimmed ammunition, and the early 20th century, is a holdover of these earlier black powder cartridges, pretty much. All the cartridges that you could think of that kind of are rimmed most likely have roots in a black powder cartridge somewhere, or at least back in the 1800s.
Yeah, I mean the ones that I can think of off the top of my head are started in the, like, we're talking around like the 1880s versus 1890s, early 1890s. That's the ones I can think of.
Yeah.
Mark, what's your opinion on rimmed ammunition?
I've always had trouble with Mosin Nagant, and I'm not going to say I've always had trouble with Lee Enfields, but I've had it more than I have with a Mauser.
Are you saying it's not rimmed for your pleasure?
Correct.
Yeah,
I had to get that joke in there, guys. It had to happen.
And one of the things that Mosin fans always defend it, they say, no, rim lock is impossible on a Mosin. It doesn't matter if you've got it multiple times, it's impossible because it has an interrupter.
I had a guy tell me once, he said you wouldn't have it if you loaded your cartridges right. Okay.
Yeah.
Never.
Which is like interesting just in itself, that like you could do it wrong. Like you could load a gun wrong.
Well, we're talking about guns that are intended for a traumatic experience, and when it's going to be very stressful. So when you're under stress, what happens? You do stuff wrong.
Yeah, but there's like, people defend gun designs that the guns have to be manipulated and loaded like perfectly in order to function perfectly. So like if you load, a Mosin, or you load a Lee Enfield, if you do it right, if the bullets are loaded just right on the clip and none of them have you put the clip in the right way and you thumb the runs down the right way, then everything is fine. Which, like, yeah, if you're on like a training grounds or you're at a shooting range, like, yeah, it's possible to do that. But if you're getting shot at and there's artillery coming down around you, like, how do you expect people to sort of be perfect every single time when
We've
operating
talked about
a
this
gun?
before, though, guys, with the gross versus fine motor skills. And as your body gets more and more stressed, fine motor skills go out the window, and that's why there's big buttons and big things on stuff where if it's going to be manipulated, it's not going to be small and hard to do. That's why, like, on a selector switch is not a really tiny little lever typically, because you want to be able to find it very quickly. It's also typically not in a weird spot, unless you're in the early 1900s.
Yep. Or as Firepower United says, when your finger don't do the working.
Yeah. Now, this is obviously looking at it from a modern perspective. Back in the day, this wasn't thought about, or if it was, it wasn't really discussed.
If you think about some of these Milsurps from a modern perspective, if the defense for an inferior feature is that, well, if you do it right, it's fine. I think you need to start questioning whether or not, like, those are good features if you have to defend it with something like that.
It's technically Murphy's Law, right? It should not be able to be done incorrectly. That's the whole point, is that if it's a good enough design, you should not be able to do it incorrectly. Now, I'm not saying that somebody couldn't figure out how to do it incorrectly, like retardedly, but like, I'm not even trying to defend any specific feature. I'm just saying that if if it's a good enough design, you should not be able to do it wrong.
Yeah.
Should be idiot
But
proof.
getting it, yeah. It needs to be idiot proof. And pretty much whenever you introduce rimmed cartridges, you come up with guns that are not idiot proof. You come up with guns that need to be loaded in a very specific way in order to be reliable. And that's when you run into issues. And then it just can't be a question of do it perfect every time. Then
Well, I mean,
take,
I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
no, well, I was going to say, look at the beginning of the First World War. I would imagine the Austrians, who had a massive illiterate conscript army, of course, the Russians are going to have trouble with such things.
Yes.
Teach them to load right under strain. The British, who had a professional army at the outset, probably didn't have as much of an issue.
But the difference is with the Austrians versus the Russians, the Austrians use an in-block clip, which you do not have to strip off. So that's actually, I would argue, a much better way to use rimmed ammunition. Same with the Berthier. It's a much better system for specifically rimmed ammunition.
That's true.
Because that's a simple packet loading. That's a simple motion. It's not a fine motion. You don't have to manipulate the ammunition at all. They would be issued it already on the clip. So it's not something that you would have to worry about as much versus a Lee Enfield or an M91. Or, and this has just popped in my head, the Krag, the US Krag is rimmed ammunition as well. And that one doesn't have a stripper clip.
No.
That one you had to load it by just shoving the rounds in there.
depends on the country.
I specifically said the US Krag, Danny, if you were listening.
I didn't hear that.
Except for the Parkhurst device. That was only an experimental thing.
It was never fully done, guys.
But I've seen something I know we restrict to only U.S. Krag, but I've seen some kind of a speed loader that the Norwegians use in Olympic competitions.
Yes, and that's another rimmed cartridge, but that's a different topic.
All right.
Plus, that magazine is, even though it's similar, it is slightly different.
Okay.
Hey, we're going to get into some nitpicky bullshit here, so let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to go with non-rimmed ammunition, or I would even... Is semi-rimmed, is that really... Like, technically, is that the term for it, Danny?
So, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, is it semi-rimmed? Is that technically the name for it?
Oh yeah, I think that is what some people call rounds that just have a very slight rim to them, like was it 6.5 Japanese?
Oh, okay. So there's technically rimmed, semi-rimmed, and non-rimmed.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's a very niche thing. So let's just go with
like not very many. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the last of the essentials or the indisputables, which is going to be front versus rear locking lugs on the bolt.
Yes. And this is, I think, of all of the out of the three that we just mentioned, this is going to be the one that causes the most butthurt. But front locking lugs are superior to rear locking lugs, and we'll pretty much name the same like two guns when trying to defend rear locking lugs, which, if you really think about the reason why those guns have rear locking lugs, it's not because it's a superior feature. It has to do with technology and, economy. So if it's cheaper to do it, then it's going to happen, but it's not the better feature.
Sorry, Mark.
Yes.
I was just going to ask you what your opinion on that was.
Well, I mean,
I don't think any of us are going to argue with you, Danny.
No, but I know the Mass 36 is one. What's the other one?
Lee Enfield.
Okay. Couldn't. I'm not going to argue at all. I agree.
I mean,
yeah.
We've already discussed rim versus non-rimmed, which would technically knock out the Lee Enfield anyway. I mean, you could argue that the 2A1. You could argue that's a version of the Lee Enfield that's not with rim ammunition. Then you would have to argue that version is the best one.
Which I do hear people trying to make that argument.
For those of you that don't know about the 2A1, that is a version of the Lee Enfield that is based on the SMLE, right, Danny?
Yes.
Right. It's based on the SMLE, not the number 4, and it was built in India, built specifically to use 7.62x51 NATO. Not a conversion. They were built that way.
In the 60s as a police rifle.
I don't have any experience with those though, so I don't have an opinion on that. But that does use the same rear locking lugs as the SMLE.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And and there, the sort of the big feature of rear locking lugs that people sort of like to say that oh, rear locking lugs are good because they don't get gummed up, as like a front locking lugs would, being so close to the chamber, which is why on black powder rifles you sort of had the switch over from rear locking lugs to front locking lugs, and which happened mostly because of the switch over to smokeless powder. So slowly you see this in more and more rifles, getting their locking lugs moved forward, like you see on the Schmidt-Rubens in particular, going from the 1889, where it's pretty far back, to the K31, where it's all the way towards the front. And the MAS 36, it was never that's sort of a rear echelon gun. That gun was never particularly made for a front line infantry service rifle position. That gun was made to be cheap and was never really meant for that frontline role.
But I've always heard that in the Battle of France in 1940, like we said earlier, the Berthiers were more prevalent, but that the more elite or units would always get the MAS 36, supposedly. And they were using frontline capacity in Algeria and Indochina later on.
Yeah. And the reason why they did the 36, right? I forget you're the French guy, Mark. So, yeah, so it's because they were developing the semi-autos, right? What was it, the MAS 38?
I've heard that they had the MAS 30, the MAS 40 was, as I recall, legend goes that the day they were going to put that into production at Saint-Étienne was the day that the Germans invaded, and they were going to produce the 36 alongside the MAS 40. And when they liberated Saint-Étienne in 44, a lot of the prototype guns they had in the vault, the resistance grabbed, and they actually used them to fight the Germans with. So a lot of the prototypes that they had from that era are lost to history.
Yeah, I have seen quite a few, and I own an original photograph of German troops with Berthier carbines. And it's interesting, they have all have been of the 3-shot variety. I haven't seen a picture of German troops using 5-shot Berthiers. There always seem to be 3-shot for some reason.
Well, there are definitely 5-shot marked guns out there, German marked, with the LK5, and with, if you believe that they stamp depot stamps on the wrist. I've seen one 1890 carbine that was updated M16 specs with an HGA stamp on the bottom of the wrist, but there are people that dispute whether those are real or not. That's a different story. But anyways, I don't want to get too sidetracked.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we don't want to keep 30 minutes on each topic. Otherwise, this podcast will be 6 hours long.
People will listen.
Yeah.
I know people will listen. So we talked. First thing was double versus single stack. So now we're on double stack. Rimmed versus non. So now we're on double stacked non rimmed ammunition. And then front versus rear locking lugs. So rimless ammunition. There you go. So we're on double stack, rimless, front locking lugs. That leaves a lot of guns out there. It only eliminates 2 or 3 of the most popular guns in the Milsurp market.
Yeah. Well, it does kind of exclude quite a bit because probably just by numbers of guns that are on the Milsurp market, it's a lot of Mosins, of course, and you have a lot of Enfields, a lot of Mannlicher magazine guns. So it does kind of exclude a lot. But these next ones that we're going to get into are going to be just the kind of really nitty gritty ones.
Well, they're not nitty gritty; they're more nitpicky, I would argue. Because some of this stuff I would say is not as important, but you get into it because we've had this argument before.
Oh yeah. So so I talk about emotional attachment, and these are probably the things that I'm like mostly emotionally attached to.
Oh, I'll do one right now that I know that you're going to be very defensive on. You ready?
Okay, I think I know what you're going to say.
Straight bolt versus turn down bolt.
Exactly.
Mark?
Turn bolt.
I'm straight bolt all the way, guys. You've seen my row of guns alongside my fence. Not a single turn down bolt or bent bolt, as it should be, on that entire lineup.
I thought there was a Craig in there. It's a 98 Craig.
It's not technically, the bolt is not bent. They cut a part out of the receiver.
Okay.
That bolt is straight.
Well, it's turned down. It's not bent, but it is a turned down bolt.
It's not a hole.
We'll define it as bolts that stick out like in the 3 o'clock position versus bolts that go further down to the 4 or 5 o'clock position. Is that a better way of saying it?
Fine. That's a very the Krag's already out anyway. It uses an in-block or uses a rimmed cartridge, so it's not even in this discussion.
Not the Norwegian Krag.
Oh, I'm sorry, the one that uses 6.5 that nobody remembers.
Yes, the one that uses the sweet caliber.
That supposedly isn't safe to shoot in it now.
No, that's the 8mm one you're thinking of.
No, but if you go on gun boards and some of these websites, they insist that shooting a 6.5 Norwegian Krag with modern ammunition isn't safe.
Yeah, there's a lot of that goes on with Norwegian Krags. It's because there's not a lot of information on them, not a lot in English at least. And
probably
what I think from take this with a grain of salt because I'm still researching, I'm learning about them, but from what I'm understanding is that it's a lot of the other like the Norwegian 6.5 ammo that is said like you shouldn't shoot, not necessarily shooting like say Swedish ammo in a Norwegian Krag, especially like a the 1912 carbine, which is sort of the strengthened action up a little bit as much as it can for having non-symmetrical locking lugs.
All right, well, getting back to our topic of a bent bolt versus a straight bolt. Now, when Matthias was on, we had this discussion again about why this exists. This is a holdover technology. This is before a time when ammunition was not built to a very high standard, well, not a repeatably high standard. So you needed a straight bolt to get more leverage. And with the advent of better manufacturing practices, there wasn't a need for it anymore. And then also the idea of being able to move the soldier's hand closer to the trigger after returning the bolt makes it for you a faster firing rate and a better target reacquisition.
And the the handiness of maneuvering a rifle around in a vehicle or something like that too, which I would say even before the handiness in a vehicle, you see turn down bolt handles on like Gewehr 98s. The what is it? Oh man, Mike's gonna hate me. I'm blanking on the name of
the Schutz Troop colonial gun you're talking about.
Yeah, the colonials. Yep.
And the Radsford Gewehr too, which is the bicycle one.
Is that the one with the paddle ones?
The paddle. What do you mean?
They have like a little paddle as the bolt handle versus.
No, that's the original K98. Like a car 88 bolt, like a waffle.
Ah, yeah. It looks like a spatula.
Exactly, yeah, like you see on a car 88 or a Mannlicher Schonauer sporting gun.
Yeah.
But the Radford Gewehr was it's a full length Gewehr 98. It's the precursor to the 98B, but I don't want to get too far off topic.
All right, so I'll admit that the straight bolt isn't necessarily necessary. Well, that's a weird way to say that, but it's a holdover of older technology, which is going to eliminate every single one of my guns, and it's not fair because the Vigero is damn close, guys.
Yeah, it's a nice gun.
Wait.
Ow.
The one you showed me, is that the police carbine? That had a turn down bolt, didn't it?
One who showed you.
Didn't you send me a link to a Brazilian Vigero with in 7mm?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, the Brazilian Vigero in 7mm.
That's got a turn down bolt, right?
It does.
And it's a carbine.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing that one that was on, but was that a legitimate thing, or was that something was that made from the factory that way? Or
yeah, the last 5,000 guns that were made actually were sold to Brazil for police carbines, and they were made as 7mm Mauser.
The Brazil ordered a bunch for their police. Maybe it was like their federal police or something. I forget. In the 20s, they ordered some. They ordered the Vigero carbines, and they also ordered a batch of they're called their 1922 carbines. I think they ordered them from FN. Those are pretty cool, and they look very similar in profile overall together.
Yeah, they shopped around and they got basically anybody that had spares of stuff or they wanted to get rid of some stuff, they bought it up. So like the contract was done for Portugal for the Vigero, so the leftover parts were sold to as the police carbine to Brazil in 7mm Mauser. So that's actually a really interesting gun that I think ticks all of Danny's boxes, but he would argue it doesn't.
Well, I do. If you do remember that one feature that I said that it does kind of fail at.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the fact that it's underslung.
No. Well, I guess it is, but that another. So I guess it's on two features then.
Oh,
but
shit.
yeah.
All right, hold on. Before we get off topic too far, so we've talked about straight versus bent bolt. We kind of shouldn't have done this one first because that's going to basically eliminate all straight pulls, and we probably should have done straight pull versus turn bolts.
Yeah, probably. Well, we can do it now.
But straight pulls versus turn bolts, I mean, the ones that everybody brings up are the M95 and the K31s, and the K11s or the 1911s.
Everybody forgets about the poor Ross.
Well, because it had a lot of problems.
Or Ross. Yeah, and then the Lean 80, which is sort of a straight pull.
That's a weird one.
Sort of a straight pull.
But anyway, a turn bolt versus a straight pull is obviously the idea of a straight bolt versus a turn bolt is going to be, or a bent bolt is going to eliminate those. Straight pull actions, while an interesting concept and paving the way for future technologies, including a lot of the technologies in modern machine guns, doesn't really translate well into a rifle.
Yeah, and it didn't. It's one of those things where straight pull rifles, and this is kind of going back a bit to the straight bolt guns. I would say the biggest things that defend the turn down bolt handle, and also that defends a rotating bolt versus a straight pull, is that when you look at the commercial market today and the guns that are being sold on there, the great majority of the guns that are being sold in the commercial market are turn bolt guns. And then those all have turn down bolt handles. You can't find any commercial guns with straight bolt handles. Now you could make the point.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay, can you name a commercial, like a modern, like?
We're talking a modern straight pull.
No, there are modern straight pulls out there. Particularly, I know the oh shoot, I forgot the name of it, but it's the target shooting straight pull.
Hammerly, maybe.
I can't. It doesn't ring a bell, but
because Browning made some rimfire. But anyway, I'm getting off topic.
Yeah, Browning made the T-bolt, which is probably the most common in terms of one that people would probably recognize, because the T-bolt's actually still currently made. You can buy those brand new.
I didn't realize that.
One of the can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can, Danny.
One of the things that I hear from people in defending the straight bolt, in particular, like I just said, is the commercial guns. But then one of the rebuttals that I've heard to that is that, well, it's because the guns are, modern, guns that are meant to be, have scopes on top of them. So therefore you need the turn down bolt handle in order to operate the gun with a scope, kind of over the top of the receiver. And there are a couple exceptions to that, namely the scout rifles, the scout bolt action rifles. What was it, Jeff Cooper's scout rifle design concept, and those guns all have scopes that are sort of way in front of the receiver that are up towards like the top of the handguard, and those all still have turn down bolts.
Unless there's some sporterized Mosin Nagant or something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't need to really get into super argument here. I mean, I just looked at the list on Wikipedia of straight pull bolt action rifles, and we're talking about maybe 50 to 60 modern guns versus all of the other bolt action rifles that exist in the market right now.
So it's definitely, and you could argue it's, yeah.
And I will say
it's a niche thing.
Danny, I will say this: even the ones that it showed pictures of on Wikipedia had turned down bolts, but they had it like offset, so you could still operate it. But it was definitely a bolt that was bent. So the action was still a straight pull, but the bolt started further down. It wasn't a straight bolt.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, let's go into some other topics.
Wait, I know the next one we should say.
Oh, what's the next one?
This will be a lighter one. This is probably another one that I'm sort of more emotional about, is the semi-pistol grip.
I'm for it. And Danny is referring to a semi-pistol grip versus a straight wrist.
I'm for it too. It's more comfy from what I think.
Oh yeah, much more comfortable.
I mean, we don't really have much to talk about. It's a feature that...
I guess not. And
It's a feature that existed a lot longer than I realized.
It only really started getting popular like in the early 1900s. By the probably the 20s or 30s, you see most guns having it by then. But it is far superior, and that's one of the things that I, as a Swedish Mauser fan, I just wish that the Swedes adopted a semi-pistol grip on their Mausers, especially like their M38s, because that would just be amazing.
This really hurts Danny right now. This is his
moment
where he loses the Swedish.
It does.
And I will say this: the concept of it's even older than I thought, because I don't know if you remember this, Danny, but my Mannlicher 1886, it has a semi-pistol grip, and that's a gun that was designed 1884, 1885.
Wow, yeah.
And that has a semi-pistol grip, and the M95s have always had a semi-pistol grip. So this feature's been around a lot longer than people realize.
Yeah, it's. I talk about it in my I have a YouTube video that kind of goes over some of these features, and if you sort of see the way whenever you hold a straight wrist stock versus where you hold a semi-pistol grip stock, and kind of where it naturally your elbow just sort of points on a straight wrist stock, it kind of makes you do a chicken wing where your elbow kind of sticks straight out just because your wrist doesn't want to turn in that sort of unnatural way where it's tucked down next to you. So from like a modern shooting perspective, the semi-pistol grip stock is really the best. And again, that's another one of those things where if you look at like the majority of rifles being sold today, majority of bolt action rifles, that is, they have semi-pistol grip stocks, really.
I was looking at my picture lineup again, and I was noticing that the Vigero especially has a very pronounced curve in the semi-pistol grip, more so than any of my others. Actually, yeah, it's interesting. I didn't expect that to be that deep of a curve on that one.
Yeah. But from a perspective of a gun that is going to be fired a lot or carried around a lot or something like that, it might not be like super duper important, but it's just something that I prefer on my rifles. So again, sort of narrowing down this list of which guns fit this sort of feature as far as this mythical best rifle. Again, I would say that the rifle would probably have to have a semi-pistol grip.
That doesn't eliminate as many as I would expect. It's going to be a lot of the older designs.
Yeah, a lot of the older ones, but like I said, even the Swedes and the newer Swedes like the M38s.
All right, so we're going with semi-pistol grip. All right, Danny, let's get into a topic that I know you're going to have a lot of opinions on.
Okay.
Side sling versus underslung.
Oh, yes. And, having a gun that you're going to be carrying around, like I said, so this is like like a woodsman's gun. If you're a hunter walking around the woods a lot with the gun on your back, or if, hiking, camping with a gun, I think that's when the side sling, really shines. I've carried Milsurps on my back for long periods of time before, either just working outside or, on actual hikes, in the wilderness. So to me, it's something that I think is very often overlooked. And it kind of contradicts, my earlier point about, modern rifles, what you see on modern rifles. You don't see a whole lot of side slings on modern rifles. Maybe sort of like some of the more technical like AR-15s and stuff you see side slings on, but the modern bolt actions, they all sort of tend to be underslung, which I can definitely see that as being a sort of a not a very good feature, and not very comfortable for carrying for long periods of time.
Mark, what do you think?
I agree with Dan. I think the side sling is a lot more comfy.
What about the side sling location, Danny? That's a big problem, right? A big concern.
Oh, yeah. And the type of side sling is another thing. So like the German side slings that you find on the K98Ks, they bother me with how the keepers, stick out of the right side of the stock. And anytime you're getting a good hold of the rifle, it seems like half of your hand is taken up by just this, weird leather, sling keeper that's like forced to be there. So not all side slings are, created equal. I like the French side sling method, the French and Swiss side sling method. Not no like on the K98K, the French K98Ks.
Like a Moss 36.
That's some super niche.
Yeah, like a Moss 36.
Let's go with the French K98Ks, which is a very super niche.
Yeah,
everybody's seen one of those, right?
Well, it's I just ordered a French K98K. Like I just it's coming in, so that's why I mentioned it. Because that's one of the things that the French changed on the K98K whenever they started making them. It's the sling. It's really the main, like one of two things they did.
No, yeah, the Berthiers are. I'm looking at mine pictures of it. The Berthiers are side slung, right?
I think they're very similar. I mean, they've got that cut out in the stock, just like a Mass 36 for K9 or a French K98 has.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something I already preferred.
Yeah. So I definitely, I think the French and Swiss method of side slings is definitely preferable, I think, to the German side sling. But I would still take the German side sling over like a traditional underslung gun. One of the guns that I've carried around on my back outside for a long period of time because I'm a nerd is the K98AZ.
You're a nerd,
with the German sling. So
that's a hipster thing to do, Danny.
It's one of those things. That's how I formed the opinion on it. I think I just gotten it, and anytime I get a new gun, I have to carry it around and stuff with me. So I'm glad my wife puts up with me. This is going to be one of the
few times to bring it up too. Danny, you're a big fan of the M95 sling point location, right? Right there in the wrist.
Oh yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's another one. That's not. Really that's not a very location. Good. I don't understand what they were thinking with that. There's a couple other guns that have that side sling placement too. I'm blanking on
the VZ24.
Yeah, VZ24s have it. Yeah, the VZ24s. The your M95 24 does too, right? Right, Aaron?
No, it's moved further back. So if you look on my picture, Danny, if you have it handy, it's about 3 or 4 inches further back on the stock. It's actually right above the knob for the semi-pistol grip, versus the M95 one is right in the middle of where your hand would go. So it's a little bit moved back. It's like they looked at it and went, "No, let's move it back."
Which is good, because it really does suck on the other one. So that's another bad one.
Well, the Germans, when they took in a lot of the VZ24s in their service, they plugged that wrist swivel. They didn't like it either.
Yeah, it really does suck.
So we're saying, for Danny's opinion, it's side, but this is one of those ones that could go either way.
Yeah, and I do sort of acknowledge that with this. This isn't like a hard thing. And in fact, somebody just commented on my video, I think today, a defense for underslung guns, and that is for what is it called when you like wrap the sling like around your arm for target shooting?
Bracing it, I would assume.
Yeah, whatever that's called. I'm not like a fancy target shooter that I do that. So
I assume you're just bracing it so your arm can't move as much. Essentially, you're preventing to prevent as much movement as possible.
And they really, strap it down and kind of torque the sling on.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know. There probably is a term for it, but yeah,
I can't think of it. But probably underslung guns are better for that, according to this guy. And I'm not going to try to debate that. I've been able to kind of do that a little bit with side slung guns as well, but maybe it works better on underslung guns. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's something I do. But and overall, outside of that, very niche thing of target shooting, I think that a side sling placement is pretty important overall in a gun.
Well, and looking at my picture here again, and I hate to keep bringing this up because you guys in the video can't see this, but or even on the podcast, because obviously you're. That's what I mean.
There's no video.
Yeah, there is no video. The longer the rifle is, the more likely it seems to be that it's underslung, versus the shorter they get, they tend to be side slung.
Yeah, and there is reasons for that.
Yeah, the longest rifle I have that's underslung or side slung is the Berthier, which is a very long rifle. It's almost as long as my 1886. But the rest of them, I have 2 Siamese Mausers, I have a US Krag, I have an M95 long rifle, I have a Chilean long rifle, and they're all underslung. And even the 1886 is underslung. And there's not.
Yeah.
I don't have another underslung gun until the Vigero.
I think it was a sort of back in the day, it was looked at as if you had a job where you needed to have a gun on your back for long periods of time, they would make that gun side slung. So like the cavalry, they're going to have that rifle on their back most of the time while they're riding around. So it needs to be side slung. So all the short cavalry carbines are going to be side slung. Infantry, they're just going to be carrying it around. So infantry needs an undersling. Of course, our guns are going to be longer. So then you have the infantry long rifles that are going to be underslung.
What's also interesting to see is that none of these are in the same location. Like everybody had their own opinion of where the slings should go.
Yeah, and then it gets weird with like the some of the other guns, like the German G98s, where there's like multiple sling locations. So like you have the traditional sling setup, and then you have that quick detach where you can put it right in front of the trigger guard for the parade placement or whatever for the sling.
You see that in a lot of South American contract guns too, like the 1912 Steyr or whatnot.
Yeah, they pretty much, the Peruvian 1909 is the same way, or no, it's not. But yeah, a lot of those like contract guns, they sort of copied that parade style.
The 1909 copies the Gewehr 98 style because it's essentially that, isn't it?
I'm going off memory, but I think last time I looked at my Peruvian, it didn't have that hole in front of the trigger guard. I'm gonna have to Google it right now and see. Okay, this one that I'm looking at right now has it.
Oh.
I couldn't remember if mine did or not, but yeah, it looks like they did have it.
Well, the only external difference you could tell, I mean, obviously the receiver crest, but the stock's gonna be marked with Mauser, I think.
Yeah, a couple other small features that if you have an eye you can look at. The receiver, I said this last podcast too, but the receiver length on the 1909 it's a longer receiver than the Gewehr 98.
Never knew that.
Yeah, I don't know if you just kind of have them side by side. It's like, why is the 1909 like receiver ring longer? Doesn't probably, like Aaron said, has something to do with the barrels. They wanted to use the small ring barrels.
Okay, you want to go accommodate that giant, beautiful crest.
Yeah,
Yes.
That is very important. Can't have a gun without a big, beautiful crest on it.
If you guys want to have an argument about which gun has the best crest, I'm going to win because the 1909 Peruvian is the best. Let's argue that. Let's get into an argument about that next time.
Yeah, that would be a good one for future ones. But we'd have to make a video about that one so that we could display it for everyone.
Yeah, because I would argue the 1909 in the white, not blued, in the white is beautiful.
I think we could just take a map of South America, throw a dart, and then we'd probably, make a good argument.
Argentina, no, not with the hands.
Oh yeah, the Argentina
and the weird hat.
No,
we're not doing that.
You know what is weird? Now, if you pull up the Argentine Mauser crest, and you look at the hands that are doing the handshake, one of the thumbs is like way bigger than it should be, and it's one of those things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like it just now, every time I look at the Argentine crest, I see this giant thumb, and it's like, oh, that's So definitely not Argentine, probably.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Sam would probably
now.
Disagree with us.
I'm looking at it right now. It's really poorly done. Like I never noticed that.
It looks like a child drew it, and like they adopted that as their crest.
I never noticed it. There's a giant thumb. Yeah. It's the hand that's on the back side, so all you see is their thumb, and it's huge.
Yeah.
Let me grab my 1909.
You gotta. It is a really weird thing, but it does look very. It looks like a kid drew it, which I don't know how that crest was stuck with. I'm sure there's some type of neat history behind it. And
there is. I know there is. I have the hat represents something specifically. The handshake and everything. Everything on that crest has a meaning, and I'm not trying to belittle.
Oh yeah.
But I just think that the Peruvian one is the best. But we can argue that all the time.
That giant thumb.
I think I'm going to go with the Persian 9829 with the lion in the center. But anyways,
that's
I like all the lion Mausers.
There's an argument.
The Czech lion is cool.
There's an argument for a lot.
Okay, yeah, that'll be future argument.
We could actually do that as a future argument. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Because even the Bulgarian contract M95s are pretty cool. Anyway, let's go into. Okay, this is a good one, Danny.
Let's just.
A V-notch versus a peep sight.
Did you say what? I didn't. You cut out.
A V-notch versus a peep sight.
aperture.
An aperture sight. Fine. We're going to use the correct name.
Well, you know what? This is one of those things that it's kind of like cock on close versus cock on open. I don't necessarily have a preference. I see the pros and cons of both. But I don't know. Most of my guns have open sights. I shoot them pretty well. So I would probably, on a combat gun, overall hunting, shooting, non-target gun, probably open sights. Okay, I guess maybe I'm deciding right now. Yeah.
Mark?
Well, I kind of gotten used to open sights over the years. Not necessarily saying they're necessarily better, but just like Danny says, when you own a lot of military rifles with open sights, so that's what my preference is, or that's what I'm used to, I should say.
Yeah,
So
and and there are some fantastic pros of apertures, but the more I think about it, it's the sight picture. There is a lot of kind of stuff going on with the aperture sight picture. There's the big ring kind of takes up a lot of space in your periphery, so. I do like the openness of the open rear sight. I think there's something to be said about that. But I know typically with aperture sights,
I mean, I can argue the Caveira 98's roller coaster sights take up a shitload of space in your periphery.
Yeah, and then, like that, those Longa Viziers are just in their own. Like that's just those sights are over there in a corner by themselves. Like that's not even. That's like the worst of both worlds. Yeah, they look cool on like looking at from the side of a gun. And like you could say that those sights, the wings that kind of stick up on either side, that those do kind of have maybe some like snap shooting potential. But yeah, I don't know what to consider that, because it's kind of the worst of both.
We're gonna make everybody mad. This is no holds barred. We're gonna piss off everybody.
I wonder if Mike's going to be angry at us for saying something.
I don't think he actually listens to us. Let's see.
I think Mike's open-minded enough that if he probably gets it. Like, and this is like I said before, you could like something and it can be wicked cool, but it might not be the best feature for actual shooting.
We've eliminated every single one of the guns I've ever owned. I've never owned a single one of these guns that is considered to be on this list still.
Yeah, the guns are too mainstream.
No, I mean, even the ones I've sold, like everything I've sold and gotten rid of is still eliminated, Danny. Like everything I've ever owned is not considered on this list. All right, so let's get into some more. Let's do cock on close versus cock on open. What do you prefer, Danny?
Well, I think cock on. Rephrase this. I think cock on open is probably the superior choice, because it seems that's what the majority of bolt action guns have switched to. If it wasn't superior, I don't think Paul Mauser would have switched his design over to it. And when you look at other guns and stuff, it kind of seems that's what everybody was doing. So there probably are some really good merits to that. Functional wise, it's probably more personal preference. You could argue that you could be faster with a cock on close design. Just from shooting, if I shot a Swedish Mauser, which was cock on close, and then I shot a German Mauser right afterwards, it's cock on open, I'm probably going to be faster with the Swede. But how much faster and how much does that matter? I'm not sure, but I think for the purposes of this video, we could say that probably cock on open is the superior design. Just because that's what just seems to be just the most prolific. But it's not like a hard no against cock on closing, but cock on open is probably superior. Yeah.
I can't remember if my Siamese Mausers are cock on open or close. I think they're cock on open.
They must be because they're a 98 action or similar.
I would say they're cock on opens.
They are actually. Thinking back, I know they are, because I have pictures of them back in the day, and one of them is cocked and one of them's not. And I remember, because I was trying to think if any of my guns were cock on open, and I think those two are, but I think that's about it. Straight pull actions, which is mostly what I collect, are cock on close because that's what it is. It's literally how the action works. Mark, what are your opinions? Obviously, I'm in the cock on open or cock on close. Sorry, because we're saying that word a lot, by the way. That's going to get pulled and definitely going to be sneaked into other things. So I prefer the close versus the open, mostly because I love straight pull actions, which is a close.
Well, I again, I'm gonna have to pretty much agree with Danny. But the one argument I always heard about cock on close was that it's going to disturb your sight picture. It's going to interrupt that. That's the big. It doesn't really matter to me at the end of the day, but it depends on the gun. Like a Swedish 96 or 95 Chilean isn't going to bother me.
I think that also depends on the action too, because like a straight pull M95 versus a Chilean 1895 Mauser, they're both cock on close, but like they're not the same action. So like I don't think that's necessarily just related to the way the bolts is engaged.
I think you're right. So yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? I think the 98 Mauser is considered to be the perfected bolt-action rifle. So Paul Mauser wouldn't have designed it any other way.
Well, he would have. He wouldn't have made it 8mm. He would have made it 6mm.
Well, that's because of the German government.
Or 7mm.
Yeah, he was really pushed hard for 6 or 7mm. He was very much influenced by the 6.5 Swede.
I believe it was a 6.5mm, but don't quote me. There's a few trials guns out there right around 6 or 6.5.
I've seen stuff about like he pushed for a 6, a 6.5, a 7, and they were like, no, we want 8 because that's what we have.
That was before they had the S cartridge.
Yeah. All right. Well, this will be.
Yeah, you want to get into cartridge then?
Well, what specifically with cartridge?
So for this rifle, for this mythical best rifle that we're talking about, I would argue that it needs to be a Milsurp that's chambered in a caliber somewhere between like 6.5 to 7mm.
That's a very narrow scope there, Danny.
Yeah, and I think it's narrow for a reason, because you see a lot of calibers that have come out and are still coming out to this day that are between 6.5 and 7mm. You know, we have the military now that's pushing for adopting the a 6.8. There's like 6.5 Creedmoors and all these fancy sniper rounds that are coming out or that are around 6.5. And and then like you said, there's 6.5 Swede or 6.5 by 55, which is a great round. 7mm Mauser, which was Mauser's response to the 6.5. And that 7mm Mauser is another fantastic caliber.
You wouldn't go up to 7.5?
I tend to stay kind of at the 7mm and not above it. I don't find too many rounds in between 7 and 7.5, so it's kind of a big jump going from 7 to 7.5. So I tend to stay 6.5 to 7.
I mean, you eliminate the French
not
7.5 by 54, right?
Yeah, and it also eliminates the amazing Swiss 7.5, which is a fantastic cartridge. But but then again, that 7.5 that carries over from way back in the late 1880s, when GP11 was being tested and coming out with. So
what about 7.35, Danny? If we're gonna mention 7.35 Carcano.
Yeah. Well, that's its own sort of thing. You could almost say that's like a semi-intermediate kind of cartridge
how about this?
Range.
7.35 Carcano. There, we mentioned it. Moving on. I'm just trying to rack my brain about any cartridges. I mean, so you've got the Japanese rounds. So you've got 6.5 in Japanese. You've got Swedish. You've got 7mm Mauser.
6.5 Mannlicher Schonauer.
Yes.
Well, is that 6.5 by 53 or is that 6.5 by 54?
54.
You're thinking of the Dutch Mannlicher 6.5, Danny.
Yeah, well, the Dutch had it in the Portuguese, right?
And the Romanians.
Yes. Yeah, but that's a rim cartridge, not the Greek cartridge, which is a 6.5 that's not rimmed.
Only the Greeks adopt that?
Well, some Macedonians got some, I believe. The Austrians sequestered some from the Steyr factory, got issued to the Polish legions, but that's about it. I mean, the Nazis used some in World War II.
I mean, basically Greece. We'll just say that.
Yes, basically Greece.
I mean, but it does exist, so we need to bring it up. But the point is that this is a very limited list you've got going on here, Danny.
Yeah, and it's because, you know, rounds in that range, in that diameter range, tend to give you the best performance, the best sort of ballistic coefficiency, and also the flattest trajectory, which I think with ice is a pretty good part of, you know, of mentioning and sort of illustrating why that's important on a modern battlefield. But that sort of point blank accuracy, you know, if you're going to be shooting at a target anywhere from, you know, 50 meters to 300 meters, it's almost the same exact hold. If you're using like a 6.5 to 7 millimeter Mauser, you know, there's not that much drop in the bullet, you know, for a lot of distance. You know, it does sort of tend to peter out, you know, after a long ways. But like I said before, they're plenty accurate, and they give plenty of performance at distance, or else new designs wouldn't be come up with. So a friend of mine, actually, David, just said that he's starting to call, because he's picking up on 6.5 Swedish stuff. He had no idea that, you know, 6.5s existed before these newer ones, and he was calling it the 6.5 Swedemore, because the 6.5 Tim was just a copy of the 6.5 Creedmoor is just a copy of the Swedish round, which actually, you know, 6.5 by 55 was designed in Norway, and then the Swedes adopted it after Norway came up with it, which they were technically kind of one country back then, but they were a two kingdom, one king,
like Austria
system.
Hungary.
So it was kind
Right.
of like that, except they could acquire separate arms.
Right. It wasn't. Yeah, you're right. So Austria-Hungary is a little bit different in terms, because they were two kingdoms, one king, but Austria kind of led that by the nose.
Yeah. So it was 6.5 by 55, which we call 6.5 Swede today, but was first adopted by the Norwegians and was developed by the Norwegians, and was chambered in the 6.5 Norwegian Krag. But yeah, it's kind of we just know it today. It's kind of like, was it 7.65 Argentine? We call it Argentine, even though the Belgians adopted it first, right?
The Belgians, yeah, then the Ottomans, then finally Argentina.
Right, but the only reason we know it in the United States is because the Argentine surplus market was probably one of the first big ones to hit the United States, and that's where that came from.
Right.
Yeah, which is like where collector nomenclature, meets like correct, verbiage of where these rounds came from and who developed them, and kind of like what you said about the Mauser cartridges last time, Aaron.
Right, there's really only three Mauser cartridges. Mark, what are the three Mauser cartridges?
7.65 Argentine, 7mm Mauser. Oh, you could make the argument 11mm Mauser? Would you make the argument 8mm Mauser?
8mm Mauser was not developed by Mauser. It was developed by the committee.
Commission, that's right.
Which he was famously excluded from. Therefore, it is 11mm Mauser. It's the third one. So, of the three, 7mm is the best.
Well, at least the ones that are popular that he developed, yeah.
The ones that were adopted into military arm. He developed quite a few different things. He was very much pushing for small bore, fast cartridge towards the end, but people just didn't want to switch. Which is getting back into that holdover of technologies again, Danny. And you already have 10 million rounds of 8mm Mauser already produced. Are you going to switch your entire army to something else? I mean, you're going to have to look at that and go, oh shit, what are we going to do with all this?
Yep, or be like the Italians or the Japanese in World War II and try to switch caliber in the middle of a war.
Or the British right before World War One. They were about to switch calibers. 303 was about to be switched to what was that?
276 Enfield, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What gun were they trying to give up the Lee Enfield for? What gun was
the Pattern 13, which would become the Pattern 14.
Which was based on what gun?
The Pattern 13 is not the Pattern 14.
Doesn't the P13 basically steal a lot of features from this other family of firearms?
Yeah, the Springfield 1903, I think.
Oh, you jerk.
I don't know what people are going to think, that we're just a bunch of Mauser lovers here. I own more Mannlicher guns than I do anything else.
Yeah. Oh man. Well,
But
there's a reason why everybody likes them.
But this is my favorite thing, though, is that because I'm a fan of the Mannlicher stuff, I can sit off to the side and watch the Mauser, Mosin, and Lee Enfield guys fight off to the side and go, this is just fun to watch. Because nobody's going to pick on me.
Yeah.
And I'm about to bring it on. I'm sure I've just made myself a big target, but anyway.
Yeah, well, it's like kicking a dead horse, you know.
All right, so we got quite a few more things, but I think we probably should wrap this up pretty soon here, Danny. We've been talking quite a while.
Okay. Yeah. So
I've got one big thing.
I think, yeah.
The one big thing that I know we want to bring up is carbine versus short rifle versus long rifle.
Oh yeah, barrel length.
So I said it your way, carbine. We debate whether it's carbine or carbine. There we go. That'll be
something else to debate.
A fight right there. So carbine versus short versus long rifle. This is going to be controversial, Danny, because you know how much I'm a fan of a long rifle. I actually like a short rifle. I think a carbine's too slow or too small, and a long rifle is obviously going to be very heavy. And I think a short rifle is a good intermediary.
Yeah,
I'm with the Vigero.
I think
and the M95-24, they're short rifles. They're about 5 or 6 inches shorter than my longer rifles, but they're just a little bit bigger than my carbines.
Yeah, those short rifles were definitely so, they were a thing, and everyone was pretty much universally switching over them for a good reason. They are that sweet spot of length and performance with, portability. So they're really nice. Me personally, I think, like, if we're going with the whole, modern carrying it around and, portability, lightweight, and all that stuff, I would go a little bit shorter than just short rifles, but I wouldn't exclude short rifles. So for me, my barrel length is, I would say, pretty much anything from like 16 to 18 inches all the way up to 24 inches. I would include in that. So that does include, most of the short rifle designs. Like I bet your Vigero probably, is the same exact barrel length of the K98K, which is 600 millimeters or like 23 and a half inches. So I'd say short rifle length, that 24-inch barrel length, is about like the maximum that I would say is good for this perfect, sort of rifle.
Which is actually kind of funny. So I just looked it up. So when they switched them from the original, which we didn't bring up, I forgot the Vigero is in a 6.5. Danny, the original?
You cut out. I didn't hear it.
The original Vigero is 6.5.
Oh, yep.
I've totally just blanked on that. But anyway, when they switched them to 8mm Mauser, they actually shortened the barrels. So the one that I have is a 24-inch barrel. They started out as an almost 29-inch barrel. You still there, Danny? Are we losing you? For everybody,
it keeps cutting out a lot.
For everybody that doesn't know, Danny is with Potato Internet. It's done by Comcast, I believe.
Apparently, I don't know what's wrong with it, man. I bought a new router, and hopefully that's going to fix it.
Comcast, your internet when you want it to be shit.
I have Google Fiber, and I'm paying extra for the 1,000 megabits per second.
Sweet fiber internet. Good thing it's working super well.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mark, what is your opinion on this? What do you prefer? I mean, this is a personal preference for me. I don't really. I love shooting my long rifles. My 1895 Chilean is probably the one I've shot the most, but like, I just prefer a short rifle.
For like a bolt gun, probably like 20, 22 inches in that ballpark. I'm not sure. I suppose they'd be right on the cusp between short rifle and carbine, but I've always kind of like the intermediate, interwar intermediate Mausers, like a VZ-24 or an FN 1924. I feel they're about the perfect length.
Yeah,
and those tend to be that 23-inch sort of barrel length. But I think I like just a teeny bit shorter than the short rifle length, which tends to be, like I said, around the 600 millimeter barrel length. So the Moss 36 barrel length, because that's longer than a carbine and it's shorter than a short rifle. And I also really like the Chilean 1935, which has a 21.5 barrel length.
What do you think about the Berthier carbines? Once again, Danny's internet is cut out, so we're gonna wait for him to show up.
Would you
again.
say the Berthier what?
The Berthier carbines, Danny. Don't you have a Berthier carbine?
Wish I knew what you said.
Can you hear me, Mark? We'll have a conversation.
You should just type it. You should just type it on the Discord chat so we can... The Berthier what?
Carbines.
The Berthier carbine. No, that's way too short, man. It's no, I take that back. It's not way too short.
Because it's 18 inches.
Seems, I don't know why it's funny when I imagine the Berthier carbine, I swear in my mind it's like an 11-inch barrel or something. Like that gun just seems so tiny to me when I imagine it. Like the Berthier carbine and the Swiss 94 or the Swedish 94 carbines. When I imagine those side by side, I imagine like the French gun is like half as long or something. I just had this weird connotation with the French carbine for some reason. But I would say I think that's about the shortest I would go. Something along those lines. But like I said, the reason why sort of caliber becomes more important when you get down to those real short calibers or short rifles is because it's in something like 6.5 Swede. It is much more pleasant to shoot out of a carbine than something larger like the 7.5 to 8 millimeters. Very nicer. A Swedish M94 carbine is a much nicer shooting experience. And my wife
Danny,
enjoys shooting the Swedish.
Saying? Are you saying it doesn't kick like a mule?
It doesn't kick.
Like a mule. Danny cannot hear me, guys. This is beautiful internet here.
It's just you, I swear. I can hear Mark fine. I just can't, it cuts out the last word of what you say.
Anyway. So I don't know. We've kind of got off on this random tangent.
All right, yeah.
I've got it written down.
But
I've got it written down. Hold on.
If you compile our points, sort of, you could say, like, of these features, and so a rimless double stack magazine, front locking lugged rifle, say 18 to 24-inch barrel, turn down bolts. I don't think we agreed necessarily maybe on the caliber, but for me it would be something 6.5 to 7 millimeter with a semi-pistol grip. I think when you narrow down all the Milsurps to guns that fit those features, I think you're really getting to the sort of cream of the crop here of Milsurps.
What does that go down to? Some small South American carbine short rifle and some like Czech rifles?
Yeah. Most of these tend to be 7 millimeter was so, common in South America. A lot of the guns that, fit this list tend to be these South American Mausers.
So Danny recommends a South American. Is there a specific model that we can point to?
There's two guns, kind of three that fit this list, this criteria list for me. The one I just mentioned is the Chilean 1935. Another one is the Brazilian Revolutionaries rifle, which I made a video on, because that's just like a VZ24, but with a turn down bolt in 7 millimeter Mauser. So that's a pretty nice gun overall, with the side sling and everything, of course.
That's the 0834.
No, that is different than the 0834. So the Brazilians supposedly they copied the Revolutionaries rifle and made the 0834s after this Paulista rebellion in Brazil.
Nice.
Did you watch that episode? If not, I can explain it to you.
I did a while ago. That's kind of.
It was for everyone that's listening. So there was a little civil war in Brazil, and the Paulistas, called that because of the province that they're from, but they rebelled against the sort of federal Brazilian government, and it's kind of amazing. They placed an order, which must have been real last minute, with Czechs, the Brno factory, for these VZ24s, basically an export model VZ24. It doesn't have a Brazilian crest or anything. It just has the standard sort of Czech markings on the receiver, marked VZ24 on the side rail. and they're in 7mm Mauser. They have a nice turn down bolt that has that's kind of flattened and knurled on the underside, which is really nice. I like that. And they got them over there. They got them made and sent over to Brazil real quick, and they were used in the Civil War. And obviously they lost, so all of the guns ended up in Brazilian custody. But they only made 10,000 of them for the Paulistas. And they went into Brazilian custody, and then some of them eventually, nobody knows how many, but some made it back to the U.S. So you can kind of find them, and nobody knows what they are. They're very like niche gun. You'll find them for sale, and like you wouldn't know what it is just sort of looking at it, but you could still find them for pretty cheap because no one knows what it is.
So we're looking at like an FN Model 24, a Model 30, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, are there any VZ24s with turn down bolts, or are they all straight bolts?
I think the one Danny mentioned has a turn down bolt, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
So
the
the VZ24 and a turn down bolt, but there's some of the later like VZs with the turn down bolts, like the VZ33, but that's an 8mm. So
right, and then the
That's
M48 is also an 8mm, which would be everything on your list except the cartridge.
yeah, except 8mm, and yeah.
The M48 is everything but the cartridge. If they made an M48 and 7mm, that would be your perfect gun.
Wouldn't the K90?
Yeah, the K90K doesn't, just because of the cartridge. There's a couple other features that we didn't mention on the list, like I like a protected front sight, and I like a rear sight that goes down to 100 meters or yards. So the protected front sight kind of leans me, away from the German stuff to the back to the Chilean 1935. Really is the ultimate gun that I chose for myself.
So Danny's ultimate choice is a Chilean 1935, guys.
It seems really weird and random, but the Chilean Carabineros, when they picked that rifle out, they selected all those features that they needed, and it just happens to be just a really fine amalgamation of rifle with everything that they wanted, because they were like a mounted police troop that they were meant to patrol like rural areas. So they needed something that they were going to carry around and use. It just so happens that the Chileans use 7mm Mauser, so they kept that. But it's a fantastic cartridge choice.
I'm looking at this though, Danny. I'm looking at the picture of one, and it has the cardinal sin for side slung. It's right in the middle of the wrist spot. It's right there.
Well, it's not really that bad. Like when using it and holding it, kind of like I said before, because of the way it's attached on the left side, it's not that bad. The quick detach sort of sling placement of it. And again, I would sort of take one of those, over still, even though it's not the perfect side sling, I would take one of those still over and under sling gun. But the real weird thing about that gun is, Ian mentions this in his video on the 1935, is that it comes with that German style quick detach sling, but they put a sort of saddle ring on the rear side, or on the rear sling placement. So it basically makes the sling permanently attached to the side of the gun. Quick detach sling, and then permanently attached it with a saddle ring.
Yeah, I see that.
Which is just really weird.
Yeah, that is kind of strange.
If it wasn't for that saddle ring, it would be really sweet. It'd been extra cool, because then you could actually move the sling around like wherever you wanted it. If for some crazy reason you wanted it under the gun, you could just move it under there.
All right.
But
we've gone on a lot of tangents. I'm sure we've pissed off every single fan of something. We actually, you know what? We didn't really attack Arasakas or Carcanos. We kind of didn't really hit on. Springfield's
and
the 30-06 is it's just a big caliber. 1903s, M1917s. M1917s are basically a brick. You're carrying around, like, you might as well carry around a fucking cinder block.
Yeah, 1917s are heavy, bulky, and long guns.
However,
people like when you kind of look at a picture of one,
but they're amazing to shoot. From everything I've been told, that they are amazing.
Like, America was sort of going through that phase of really liking and wanting target guns, and so was Britain. Coming when they designed the P-13, P-14, coming out of the Boer War, they basically wanted a target gun. So they designed a gun that has a very long barrel and a really nice long sight radius, rear aperture sight, so they could shoot really long. That saying, what is it? The armies always prepare to fight the last war or whatever.
Yeah.
So they basically designed a target rifle. And the gun is it is too long, it's too heavy, it's way overly bulky. Like if you seriously compare like the top of the rear sight protector, which is on the top of the receiver on the 1917 or the P-14, the top of the rear sight protector to the bottom of that potbelly magazine, it is huge. It is really thick compared to just about any other type of bolt action rifle. So it's very bulky, and it is heavy, and it is long. Like the P-17 was excluded from this list mostly because of the overall length of the gun.
Don't say the P-17, Danny.
And I understand the argument that people say that like, oh, this was the best rifle like ever, it's the best rifle of World War One, and it's like, yeah, but it still has a 26-inch barrel. Like it's a very long barrel. Like that's past short rifle range, and that's into like traditional like long rifle length like range. So it's basically an older long rifle.
I'm just going to say this right now, though,
which,
Danny. You should not
to
call it
me,
the P-17 because it is the United States Rifle Caliber 30 model of 1917. Get it right.
You're going to have to say that again. I didn't hear that.
Don't worry about it. It's just a
What
stupid
he's
joke.
saying is people are going to get, because P implies pattern or British designation. People get offended when you...
Oh, shit. Did I say P-17?
Yes.
Oh, son of a bitch. But, okay. 1917.
Good enough.
The 1917, I think I'm just thinking P-14, and then I just ended up saying 1917. So please forgive me, everyone listening. The 1917. Now, to me, if you took a 1917 and you took off the pot belly off of it, right? So you just made it just a regular 5-round capacity, slimmed it up, you shortened the barrel to like, right around 23 inches or so. You chamber it in something like, like maybe what the British were originally going to do, or something like 7mm Mauser. I think you then have a pretty viable option there. I think that's a pretty good gun. But, I think in 30-06, I think that cartridge is too heavy recoiling. It's a super long cartridge. Like the overall length, it's very long. It makes the action very long. And it's just not the preferred thing. Like and sitting on a bench shooting long range with a 1917, like that's super nice. Like I get that. And if you're shooting 30-06, you want a big, long, heavy gun, and then you want those really nice rear sights to take advantage of that accuracy like at distance. So like I totally get why people say it's as good as it is. But again, we're aiming towards this mythical rifle that has all the best features, and and in real life, we have to make compromises. We can't just put 26-inch barrels on every gun and say that's the perfect barrel length when it's not. Like 26 inches is too long.
So I was looking up the pattern 13. Can you hear me, Danny? He can't hear me. So Mark, you're going to have to repeat this to him. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. The 276 Enfield is a 7mm. So that if they had continued down that road, that's potential that a revised version of the pattern 13 could have been a rifle that we're talking about now.
Like, have been. Well, you still there, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I had to adjust my microphone, but I was going to say in World War II, Ishapur chopped down a bunch of 1917 Enfields, gave them to the Chinese troops going into Burma. I can't remember the exact barrel length, but they were a lot short. Not a lot, but they were reasonably shorter than the 17. I think it was a 22-inch barrel. But had they done that, maybe it would have been better. Had they done that for a standard issue.
It's just interesting to see this kind of stuff. Like, potentially that rifle could have been modified post World War One with the lessons they learned from World War One, and then you would have ended up, instead of the number 4, you would have ended up with the pattern 13, which would have been made into a short rifle version eventually, or maybe even a carbine. So it's interesting to see where it could have gone.
Yeah.
My understanding is the P14 was mostly a second line weapon for the British, except in sniping role.
The P14, yes, I'm referring to the pattern 13, which was the 276 cartridge, not the not the 303.
Yeah. It's really interesting, yeah. So like all the people that defend the infield, they sort of like pretend that the P13 wasn't a thing.
Oh, it is what it is. So Danny, do you want to?
The British were gonna basically adopt a Mauser. They were getting away from rimless and getting it. I'm gonna do it. They're gonna adopt a Mauser basically. They're gonna adopt a rimless round, and they were gonna adopt something in 7mm because that was the best options at the time.
I'll play devil's advocate here. It was the best options for what they wanted to make, which was a target rifle.
I think the Canadians made a better target rifle.
Too bad it wasn't a good war rifle. Boom!
Boom.
Ross fans, suck it. All 3 of you guys, all 3 of you Ross fans, suck it.
Okay.
You're making like dozens of people angry.
I'm making dozens of Ross fans angry. Don't worry.
Everybody in Canada is going to be mad at you now.
Just you look at me with your one good eye, and we'll have this conversation later. Do you get it, Mark? I'm implying that they have one eye because the bolt went back into their other one. Do you get it?
Okay, it took me. Oh, funny. Like that's like the French joke where
never
been fired.
Except the Ross joke, nobody knows because nobody knows about the Ross.
Well, nobody knew until there was a video on YouTube about it.
Yeah, until Ian blew up his gun or whatever, showing it.
Well, he tried to, but it didn't work that well. People should have read it. Riflemen went to war.
All right, Danny, do you want to give us an outro? Let's give us an outro before we start making everybody mad.
Trash Truck and the Ross. I would love to have a 1905 Ross. I love that like magazine system where you hit the little plunger with your left hand and then you just like chunk the rounds in there. Like it just depresses the magazine follower, right?
The Harris magazine system. That was the name of it.
Yes. I want to do that just one time. Just hit that button, just literally throw a handful of cartridges in a magazine like that. Because like the Krag, you can kind of do that, but it's not the same because it's just like a little door that you fling open. But like on the Ross, you could really throw a handful in there at once.
All right, Danny, give us an outro. Come on, before we piss off every single person in the world.
Oh man, see, this is just good. This is just good stuff. So, again, I am like, these are my opinions, except for the indisputables. Those 3, I think, are pretty much a pretty solid fact, I would say. But just about everything else, this is just my opinion. This is just our opinions on this. So, and again, not saying that certain guns that don't make this list aren't cool or whatever. Like, I get it. I have a lot of, we all have a lot of guns that weren't necessarily the best service rifle, but they are still really cool and neat guns to collect and own.
M95 is the best.
Okay. And getting all that out of the way, that being said...
The 8890 is better. What? Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
So getting all of that out of the way, I really I hope that this sort of makes people sort of just think about certain features that they find on military surplus. And I encourage people listening to just do the same thing that we just did, make a list of certain features that you prefer in rifles. Maybe, write down the same sort of the same points that we were making, see which features you really like the best and sort of narrow that down, do your own research and see what rifle you think is, going to be perfect for you. Dan Lopez, he did the same thing, and he actually came up with the Norwegian Krag 1912. So, everyone's going to have their own sort of opinion, and this might help you discover like a new family of firearms that you didn't know about before, and maybe you'll start liking something new. So I thank everybody for listening. Thank you, Mark, for showing up and for hearing this crazy rantings of weird technical features that That is just real weird, but that's just that's how we roll.
Well, we decided that we wanted to make everybody mad, so I think we hit everything, right?
Yeah, this is
Arasaka's
that's
blow
what we
up.
should call
Japanese
this.
rifles.
Arasaka's blow up. Springfield 1903's blow up.
They blew up.
Yeah.
M1917s
Yeah,
are a cinder block. Lee Enfield's suck. Rimlock. Let's see. Magazine.
Mosins are garbage rods.
Mosins are garbage rods.
98 Mausers crack at Tang.
Wow, I didn't even heard
Turkish
that before.
Turk 8mm will crack your stock.
Italian Carcanos, you might as well just use wet spaghetti. What else? M95s. What else can you say? Nobody uses them.
I don't know. Yeah.
I
think we pissed everybody off.
What about Mosin and Gantz?
Well, we said garbage rods. Obviously,
garbage rods.
That's the best way to describe them. I think that we've hit everybody.
Liquor Schonauers. It's like, what are you? Are you?
Wait,
man?
Danny. We forgot.
Yes.
The M1 is the greatest thing ever. Not.
Oh yeah. Vulnerable.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. I'll see you later.
Have a good night.